So I want to try to answer the question today, what is addiction? And we said addiction is a gradual rewiring of the brain. And that means it has implications on both your biology and your psychology, right? So using the computer metaphor for just a minute, you can think of your biology as the hardware and the psychology as your software. Right, so your mind kind of runs this software. That's how you think of things. That's how you have desires and wants and needs and everything like that. I want to use a piece of software that I know you're all familiar with, and that would be a search engine. Maybe a search engine like Amazon's search engine, but you could use Google or Facebook or any other kind of software. So what happens is, you type something in there, and then it runs off and it does a bunch of software processing. We'll call that psychological processing, and then presents the answers back to you. And that's kind of like your consciousness. Like, this is the limited amount of things that you see, but behind the scenes there was all that software processing and checking with databases and rank ordering things, and then bam, you get this back. Right? So that's how your mind works. You have a lot of low-level, what we call it, below consciousness processing of software, and what's on top of that is that consciousness. Like, you get to see the tip of the iceberg. So let's imagine you've got Amazon open someday and you decide you're going to type in shoes. So you type shoes, and what does Amazon do? It presents you with a bunch of shoes. Here it is, you've been thinking about shoes, you want some shoes, you got shoes, buddy, no problem. Now you know how this works too, because you know that you've done this before, that the next day when you come back to Amazon, it's already going to be preloaded with a couple of pictures of shoes. Because Amazon has learned that, you like shoes, you like to search for shoes and socks and related kinds of things. So you now have that kind of in there. It's almost like your mind is already preloaded to think at least a little bit about shoes. Well, what happens when the day comes and you decide to experiment with drugs? Well, you type drugs into the Amazon search engine, you're going to get drugs back, right? And I tell you what, drugs are a very powerful psychological phenomenon. They feel really good. It's like you told Amazon, man, that's the best thing I have ever bought in my life. What does it do? It learns, right? It learns that, oh, well, tomorrow you wake up, I think we're going to let you think about drugs again. Right? You're thinking about shoes too, but you're now kind of thinking about drugs too, because it felt so darn good to you. That's that software processing below the surface. You're not trying to think about drugs, it just kind of pops up into your consciousness, maybe a couple of times throughout that day. The way Amazon is just kind of popping up those things that it learned you kind of like. So you get up the next day, oh, there's a little bit of things in there, you might think about drugs again, or cigarettes, or smoking stuff. You wake up another day, oh, sure enough, they're kind of there again. You're thinking about a little bit more drugs here and there. And then you don't want to think about drugs, you want to think about Mexican food. So you type Mexican food in, and sure enough, Amazon presents you Mexican food, but mixed in there are still going to be some thoughts, some desires about drugs, right? Because the software is learned. It's a very gradual process, right? Amazon kind of gradually learns what you like as well. So you wake up another day, and you're not really thinking about drugs, but it pops up occasionally, and so you try another dose. Right? Somebody offers you one, maybe you think I'll experiment one more time, and sure enough, again, the rush, all of that experience, it's getting coded by the software. It's like, man, you must really like this thing called drugs. It might be alcohol. You wake up the next day, and now there's even more drugs in your consciousness, right? You think about more than you would. You want it a little bit more than you did the day before. And then every day after that, it's still in there. And you try it again. It gets stronger and stronger. And every day going forward now, the software that's below the level of your consciousness is telling you you want drugs. Right? It's almost as if Amazon decided the only thing you want is drugs. It's only going to show you drugs. You type Mexican food, you're going to get drugs, because that's what the software learned. Now, there was no moment in there where you decided, I think I only want drugs, right? It's a gradual process. You didn't decide you want to be addicted to drugs, but you trained the software to want drugs. That's what addiction is like.